morning and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna of Angles and Attitudes. This morning, I have former Chicago Cub Gene Hiser on the podcast. And Gene, this is truly a pleasure because when I was that 12, 13-year-old coming into Wrigley Field, I do remember you very well, and would just love to go back and reminisce and talk about how this got started for you, and of course how it was to play for the Cubs and the things after that. Even we're going to talk a little bit about the Chicago Storm with the famous right-hander Milt Pappas, who threw the perfect game in Wrigley Field. Not the perfect game. Bruce Fleming stopped him from throwing the perfect game, I always say. But welcome to the podcast, Gene, and how you doing, young man?
I'm very fine, John. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Gene, you're born in Baltimore, Maryland, I see.
Yes.
Yeah. And does it start there, right? Do you stay in Baltimore with the family? Is that where the whole baseball thing starts?
Well, I mean, I played, in high school and then college at Maryland.
Yeah.
And then when I signed with the Cubs, then I met my wife about 2 years into playing. And then I ended up staying in Chicago from that point in time on.
And your wife was from Chicago?
She's from here, yes.
From Chicago. Very nice, very nice. You played at Maryland, correct? I think you were even an All-American there, correct?
Right. Yep.
At Maryland.
Yes.
How does, in a lot of the podcasts that I've had with athletes, if it's a baseball player, hockey player, how does Gene Heiser get noticed at the young age? Do you remember like a scout or a coach that might have says, okay, he's fleet of foot, he can hit, he can do that. How does this happen for somebody like you?
Well, John, like kids get drafted out of high school, you see all the time.
Right.
But I went to Maryland. When I went to Maryland as a freshman, I was 5'2" and I weighed 125 pounds.
Wow.
When I entered my sophomore year, I was 5'10" and I weighed 190 pounds.
Wow.
So, and that's when I made, when I played freshman, when I was a freshman, I actually played varsity soccer, and I played, and I had to quit that to play baseball in the spring because at Maryland, you played all year round. But kids get drafted out of high school, and naturally, as 5'2", even though I was a very good athlete and I played all the time, I wasn't going to get drafted then. My sophomore year, I was fortunate. I was all conference at an ACC, but I played for a team in Baltimore called Johnny Leone's. Mm-hmm. And that was a 16, 19-year-old team. They were national champions like 25 out of 35 years.
Wow.
Reggie Jackson played for him, Tom Phoebus, Ron Swoboda.
Sure.
Anybody from the Baltimore area that played for this team. And this is the team we played 7 days a week, double headers on Friday, double headers on Saturdays, and triple headers on Sundays. It was coached by the Baltimore Orioles East Coast scouting advisor, and our two coaches were scouts for the Orioles. So off of this team, we had 18 kids, 17 were drafted.
Wow. And
we played the best talent that went up and down the East Coast. And because of that, at every game we played, there would be 12 to 13 scouts easily.
Sure.
So because they knew they were going to see the best talent that we had, but they were also going to see the best talent from other teams too. So they just come to our games because they knew they were going to get to see continuously good talent. So that's basically how you get drafted. You got to be seen by the scouts of different things. When I was
You still there, Gene? Yeah. Might have lost you here, Gene.
After my junior year in college. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you, Gene. I got you.
Okay. So anyway, so my junior year in college, after that playing with that Johnny Leone's team, I was offered to play in the Valley League, which was like the #3 college league. I was also offered to play in the Cape Cod League, which was the second #2 team,
wow.
#2 league. And the #1 league was the Basin League in South Dakota. And when I got that offer, my coach said, my college coach said, you should go there because all the scouts on the East Coast have seen you. The scouts from the Midwest, and now you're going to play against the kids from Arizona, California, and stuff like that. So you want to play out there. So I went out there and played, and that probably then my senior year helped out a lot too. But that probably got me where
Where you're noticed, right?
Yeah. That was a biggie because I was like in the top 10 in every offensive category. And I was a great defensive player, and I had great speed. So I led in, I was one of the leaders in stolen bases, home runs, RBIs, hit average, and stuff like that. Plus, I could play all the outfield positions, and I also played first base in that league.
Sure.
Then when I came back to Maryland, my senior year, we had a really great hitting team. Whereas our worst hitter was our catcher. He hit 310.
Wow, okay.
He was a freshman. He hit 9.
Not too many catchers hit 310. Yeah.
No, but I was lucky. Maryland was a great school because my sophomore year we had the #1 pitching staff in the nation.
Wow.
Their ERA was .35.
Oh my God. Yeah. Wow. Do you remember some of those guys on that team with an 0.35?
The only guy that people might recognize here was Tom Bradley. He
played with the White Sox.
Right.
Yes.
The other 3 guys all hurt their arms in AAA. They all threw, really good, great velocity, great stuff. But pitchers, as you know, get hurt. And probably, back then they didn't have all these good surgeries they have today.
No.
So they were pretty much wiped out. They hurt their arm.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of guys had rotator cuff injuries back then and didn't even know about it.
Right.
The soreness.
Speaking of that, I'm having rotary cuff surgery on my right shoulder in 3 weeks.
Okay, on your right shoulder, but you were a lefty. You threw left-handed, right? Okay.
Right. But you, is the Cub doctor who's doing, Dr. Greslow is the Cub doctor who's doing my surgery. He said, Gene, it just, eventually he said, you put a lot of stress on your shoulders over those years. And it just basically just finally, gave way.
It's the wear and tear. Yeah. My dad used to say when he was alive, I'd say, Dad, what's wrong? He goes, my shoulder hurts, my arm hurts. I go, what is it, Dad? He goes, I think it's a thing called the rust. The rust is settling in, my father would say. I got to ask you, you're drafted, in the first round by the Cubs, 19th. I mean, you're high up there when the Cubs draft you there, and just before that 71 season, correct?
Right.
Yeah. Do you remember your first game in 71?
Oh yeah, I can tell you all about that. But you should know that in 70 is like when I was a #1 draft choice. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to show you what happened was, I took finals on Tuesday at Maryland. I went down the ocean on Wednesday with my couple of my teammates and girlfriends and stuff like that. And then on Thursday was the draft. And the PR guy for the Cubs said, Gene, what hotel are you going to be at? And I'll call your hotel and let you know what you're drafted. So he calls the hotel. I'm on the beach. The guy comes out and gives me the phone. He says, hey, you're the #1 draft choice. The Cubs said they'll see you on Saturday after the draft, Thursday, Friday draft. I said, okay, fine. I went home Thursday night. We went back home. Friday morning, I was laying in my parents' swimming pool, drinking a beer, eating a sandwich, and the Cubs come walking around our fence. And so that night, that's Friday. That night, my parents and I were at Wrigley Field.
Oh, wow. So
I went from taking finals on Tuesday,
finals,
1 day off, and then I'm Wrigley Field.
You're in Wrigley Field on it. Was it, Gene, did you get a call back then in those days? Was it John Holland?
Oh, I can't. Well, I met John Holland. No, the scout was Buck O'Neill, who's the
Buck O'Neill. Sure.
He was like their scouting advisor.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
So he took the word of whoever the East Coast scouts. He went. They decided they picked me. So, and they came in. They said, here's what we'll offer you. And I said, well, they said, well, what do you want? And I said, I told them what I want. And they said, well, we'll give you that. Plus, we'll give you a big league contract.
Wow.
So,
and
and back then it's kind of funny because big league contracts back then was $10,000. That was the minimum salary.
right.
So, and that was the average, technically, that was the average family income back in 1970.
Back in there, too bad we couldn't be moving the decimal points to what they are today.
Oh, the difference between then and 20 years later, I'd be a millionaire.
Oh my God! Incredible, incredible.
Yeah.
So that first weekend in Wrigley Field, you played in Wrigley Field. It wasn't a road game. Do you remember? Did you get in that game?
I did not. DeRocha did not play me. I was with them for the home series. Okay, we played the home series. I think 6 or 7 games. Then we went to San Diego, L.A., San Francisco, and then DeRocha hadn't played me yet. And they said, Gene, we're going to leave you AAA. You're going to play the exhibition game. We're playing the Tacoma Cubs tonight.
Okay.
So they left me. I went and played with Tacoma. So I played against them that night. And then the next day, Tacoma went on a 10-day road trip to Hawaii.
Yeah, they're right.
So not a bad deal. So I've been in baseball professionally for maybe 2 months, and I've been to Chicago, San Diego, LA, San Francisco, and Hawaii.
Would have been nice to have had. I would have loved to have you as a client because I own a travel agent. And Mileage Plus would have been nice in those days.
Well, that was my first time traveling, that far.
Sure,
I mean, I've flown to South Dakota, and I've flown to the South Carolina for the regionals and stuff like that. But no. Gene,
you brought up a guy that I was intimidated by when I was a youngster because I heard of his career, of course, with the Brooklyn Dodgers, the New York Giants. How was DeRocha to you as that rookie coming up in '71? Here's Leo DeRocha, who starts to fade a little bit by '71. What I think with his players, especially some of the veterans on that team, was he intimidating to you coming up?
No, he wasn't intimidating. He just didn't like rookies.
He didn't like rookies.
So I knew there was no chance I was going to play. And basically, you talk about '69 and stuff. The reason they lost was it's real simple. It's hot in Chicago. You're playing all day games.
Yes.
All right. DeRocha played 8 guys. He used 4 pitchers and 1 relief pitcher. Right. So on a 25-man roster, he only used basically 13 guys.
Right.
And that's why they lost. It's as simple as that. He did not play anybody. And if you looked at the time, the guys who were winning, the Weavers, the Chuck Tanner with Pittsburgh and stuff like, these guys played their 25 men. Being from Baltimore, after I signed everything, we worked out with the Orioles in the offseason. My best man at my wedding was the backup shortstop, Tim Norbrook for Belanger.
Okay.
So we played, we go to the YMCA, work out with them, and then we play like 5-on-5 basketball against them for about 4 hours. Okay. But you got to learn, like Marv Rettenman was there, and Terry Crowley. Okay. And these guys would say, and we talk about Weaver playing, and then we played golf when the weather was good. We'd play golf in the winter, and Weaver would play with us. We have like about 15 guys who would play and stuff like that.
Right.
But they said the great part about Weaver, he would tell you, say, hey, you're playing tomorrow. You're starting the game tomorrow.
You were prepared. Yeah.
When you came in, he'd say, hey, this guy's like Terry Crowley's left-handed. He said, hey, this guy's a strong right-handed pitcher. Be available to pinch hit, be ready to pinch hit. So he knew he let these guys know what they were doing. They knew what their position was. Right. And Redmond and Crowley and a lot of these guys, their outfield, they split some of the outfield. I mean, they had the unbelievable infield that they never came.
Of course, yeah.
When you have 4 Gold Gloves.
Robinson, Belanger, Davey Johnson, and Boo Powell at first. Yeah, exactly.
And then you got Paul Blair in center.
Yeah.
And Andy Etchebarren was the catcher. So they had, you're talking the Gold Glove right up the middle. I mean, what a pleasure to pitch for that team, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hit the ball wherever you want, right? Exactly. Gene, and a great point what you made about '69. I just had Rich Nye here a couple of weeks ago, the lefty, and Nye told me exactly verbatim what you said. He goes, we're sitting in the bullpen, and that's all he would do when, let's say, like Fergie, Holtzman, or Hands got in trouble. He's calling down to Phil Regan, and Regan's arm was shot by the middle of September. It was gone. But no, great point. I just thought, here's this rookie coming into camp. You know, when I go back to thinking about you, and I want to thank my friend Dave Kashaba, who set this interview up with us today, a gentleman that I see you on the golf course with. The Cubs were in a transition by the time they got there, meaning they already had some old players in the outfield. I mean, Billy was still a solid left fielder. I think guys who came up were like you, Cleo James, Billy North. Hickman was already starting to wind down. They brought up a guy named Johnny. They've got a guy from Philadelphia, Johnny Callison, who was past his prime. When you got to Chicago, did you think, bless you, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
When you got to Chicago, did you think, okay, this, you know, I can crack into this lineup? I mean, did you feel like there was this really good chance between those years of 71 to 75?
Well, I thought so, because they really didn't have a center fielder.
No.
And that's what and then I ended up playing a lot more right than I did anything else. But and then in 71, when I went into the service, and then I came out of the service and came back up to the big leagues. And then Drosha, you asked me who I start, you know, Drosha was still managing. So my first 6 starts in the big leagues was Bob Gibson, Tom Seaver, and Nolan Ryan. Then I went on the road and got Bob Gibson, Tom Seaver, and Nolan Ryan again.
Oh, wow.
So that was my first 6 starts. And actually, I think I am 4 for 6 against Gibson, 3 for 7 against Seaver, and 0 for 6 against Ryan.
Right.
And I as one of my kids told me when Ryan wrote his book, and I was coaching my daughter's 12-year-old soccer team. Oh, Mr. Heiser, you're in Nolan Ryan's book. And they're all parents are thank you. Oh, that's fantastic. And like after the game, you know, after our game, I looked at the book and I said, "Did you guys read this book?" I said, "What?" They said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I'm strikeout number 670."
Okay, so
That's how it's in his book.
As the outsider looking in, Gene, you talk about 3 top starters: Gibson, Ryan, and Seaver. Were they totally different? Like, say, let's just talk about one pitch. Was all of their fastballs different? Were you seeing,
okay,
besides seeing an aspirin tablet?
Gibson would just challenge you. He would just rear back and just try to power you. Seaver was the seating. Seaver had that long motion, good leg kick, and his ball kind of popped on you. And Ryan was just explosive. I mean,
Welcome to the National League, Gene Hiser. Wow, Jesus, that was something.
See, my problem with Nolan Ryan was Cleo James was leading off, and he had him my first time against him. He had him 0-2, excuse me, and he drilled him in the back.
Oh,
I'm next up, okay, and I'm left-handed, right? I think my foot was in the first base dugout. I was bailing that fast, you know. You see a guy get hit with that fastball. It's amazing.
Wow.
But I'll give you a quick story on Gibson.
Sure.
When we played Gibson, the first game was Gibson against Fergie.
Oh,
it took an hour and 20 minutes. They both get the ball, they throw it. The game was over, you know, in an hour and 20 minutes. We beat him 1-0. When we went to St. Louis, we were up like it was a 1-0 game. It was about the 6th or 7th inning. I'd already gotten a hit, and I coming up in I think it was about the 6th inning, and there's a guy on second base. And so we have no outs, and the guy was going, it was at the bag, and I was going to be on deck. And before I go to on deck, Hank Gary,
the lefty
from the Mexican lefty from Detroit, and
yes,
was DeRocha's liaison supposedly. Hank says, "Gene, come here quick." And I said, "What?" And I said, "Well," he says, "Hey, you remember every time you face Gibson, there's been nobody on." And he just rears back and challenges you. He said, "Now there's a guy on this. That's like a go-ahead run on second base." He said, "First pitch is going to knock you on your ass." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah." Sure enough, John, first pitch, right under my chin.
Whoa. Yeah.
But these guys knew these things. It was amazing. When I faced Seaver the first time, Billy Williams told me, he said, "Okay, Gene, take the first pitch." He says, Seaver he's very, very habit forming. He said, if he throws you a slider inside, next pitch will be a fastball away. if he throws you a fastball inside, next pitch will be a slider away. He said he'll work you both. So first pitch was a slider inside. I took it. Next pitch was a fastball. I was just looking outside. I hit a line drive to left field. And I said, God, you know, that was great advice.
Yeah.
I mean, they knew these guys' patterns. It blew my mind.
Yeah, and you know what's amazing? Those, you know, and I was just going to ask you, guys like, say, Hank Aguirre, the great lefty reliever, and Billy Williams, these were the analysts of the day, your own teammates. Now we hear a Steve Stone say, okay, Heiser's coming to bat. He's going to throw him a slider on the outside corner. That was beautiful that a veteran player, you know, would help a rookie, you know, coming into the league. That had to be something to face. I mean,
but see, they didn't treat, you know, when I came up, they didn't treat me as a rookie. I mean, I was young,
sure.
but they did not treat me as a rookie. They treated you just like, it wasn't like the thing where you got hassled or anything. You had, you know, like the football players carry the equipment. Baseball was, they treated you just like everybody else. You were an equal with them.
Sure. Those were some. That's a great story, and of course, you know, knowing to know what was coming, and again, in '69, a center fielder who broke up Seaver's no-hitter. Seaver claims in a book he didn't know how to pitch to Jimmy Qualls because he had never faced Jimmy Qualls, and he challenged him, and Qualls hit this single to break up the perfect game in New York. Yeah.
Well, that happens a lot in September when you have the call-ups.
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
and they'll bring in some pitcher, and the veterans will ask the guys who played, "Did you guys play against this guy in the minor leagues? What's his throw?" You know,
Great. That is great stuff. You know, I noticed during that tenure with the Cubs, 71 to 75, in 73, Gene, you get into 100 games.
well, 73 was kind of weird because when we started the season, Whitey Lockman was the manager.
Yeah, why do you assume?
And I would start 3 to 4 games a week. So he would give, you know, because you wouldn't remember this, but I'm the idiot that Drosha put in the lineup to break Billy Williams' streak at Wrigley Field.
Oh yeah, the consecutive game streak. Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes.
And people I got hit with everything but the kitchen sink in left field. People were booing me and they're throwing things at me. And Bill, I came in afterwards and Billy's just sitting there laughing. He thinks it's funny, you know, and we talk about it still today. But
you probably took it worse than Bartman did the night they lost that playoff game.
but it was sad. Yeah.
Yeah, but in 73, you did have a lot of games.
I started almost I think it was the beginning of July. I was leading the major leagues in hitting.
Wow.
Okay. And then what happened was, because we're first place, but it's like we've had this run with all the veterans. And I guess the word came down from upstairs. Mr. Wrigley wanted to play the 8 starters, and we'll decide whether we're going to get rid of them or if we're going to continue with these guys. I didn't start another game until September 26th.
Wow. You know what was weird about that year, Gene? 73 was the last year that I call where those veterans were still all together. But there was a lot of people forget that in 73, I think with about a week left or so, the Cubs were only 5 games out before eventually they succumbed to the Mets also in 73. But again, the team was a little bit in disarray because after that year, Sano was gone, Fergie was gone. You guys went to a rebuilding mode with guys like yourself, Rosello, Vic Harris, Bill Madlock. There had been a big change in Chicago after that year.
It was gigantic. Billy Williams went too. Remember?
He went to the Oakland A's. Exactly. You finish it off there in 75 with the Cubs, correct?
I finished at 75 the Cubs, got sold to the White Sox July of 76.
I was happy about that, and I'll tell you why. I'm more of a Sox fan these days than I was a Cub fan. And now I'm very a White Sox fan. Now, but with the White Sox, did you ever play in a game in a White Sox uniform?
No, they bought my contract. I was actually here. I came home. I was actually here 2 weeks. They were working out, or they were playing, and I worked out with them. And then I'd leave and come back home. And then after about a week and a half or something like that, they said we have an opening in AAA, and they sent me to Iowa. and Tony LaRusso was the player coach
Wow.
under Lauren Babe. So he was there. Tony was with us with the Cubs in '73. People don't realize that.
Yes.
To start the season.
Right, exactly.
So I got to know Tony in spring training that year. And so then, I knew him when I came over. So.
And then I see maybe a little bit toward after the White Sox, you tried it again with Baltimore a little bit.
I went to Baltimore, but I got released the last day and sent down the last day. And my wife and I talked about it. And back then they didn't bring guys up at 20, 28, 29 years old. And we decided, let's go home. I'll get a job, a full-time job. She was a flight attendant, so she had her full-time job. And, we wanted to talk about starting a family.
Sure.
And so that's, we made that decision. We came home.
Gene, did you know at that time, even though, it was a decision time to make that, okay, I've done this, and you've done it for a long time, and you had a nice pro career. To say here, like even myself, I played hockey my whole life, would have loved to have made it at that kind of a level. Were you finally said, okay, I've done this, I've tried?
It took me a while. No, because I felt I could still outplay probably 80% of the outfielders in the big leagues.
Wow.
Because for me, if I played every day, which I do when I went to AAA, I hit 300, I hit home runs.
Right.
The one thing people don't realize that I played 5.5 years and 6 years in the big leagues. I made one error in 6 years.
Wow, great fielder.
So that was my thing. I had a great thing. Matter of fact, the one year I played in the minor leagues, I got a silver glove because I fielded 1,000 for the year.
Sure.
So, and that was like the gold glove for all the minor leagues. They did a silver glove. And it was kind of funny because myself and Mike Squire, who played
first base for the White Sox.
Mike and I both played for Iowa that year. We both won a silver glove.
Wow. Incredible. I remember when you came up with the Cubs, you were known for your speed and your defense. Because I remember I could still see you and Cleo James before Wrigley Field games racing each other in the outfield, doing sprints. And I would always say, these guys can fly. Well, just to kind of cap it off here, I know you played a little softball then with the Storm, and Pappas was the manager, Milt Pappas.
That was kind of fun. It was like this professional softball league came in, and we played like in Cleveland, Detroit, Louisville, Baltimore, St. Louis. Nice. There was like 8 or 9 teams in the league, and you played doubleheader Saturday, doubleheader Sundays. And Chicago had the base where we had the they're the famous softball team. They were 16-inch, and they were the number one.
Bobcats?
Bobcats, right?
Yeah, the Bobcats, yes.
So we had a lot of players from there and from that league. So baseball players for them was kind of different, but it was funny because we played Detroit, which was another really good team, and they actually had Norm Cash and Jim Northrup on their team.
Oh, wow.
And neither one of them played because they had the Boppers on Detroit too. We played the first series in what's called the Windy City field down on 95th Street. And they had to go to a dull ball after we played the first weekend. There was, I think, 98 home runs hit in the 4 games.
Oh, geez. Wow.
I led off in that team, and all I do, from being left-handed and playing as a kid, I could, you got to hit the ball left side of the second base and stuff.
Sure.
So I could hit the ball any place I wanted, especially when it's slow pitch.
And this was high arc 16-inch, right?
Well, they'd have it at the limit. You couldn't go way high, and it was 12-inch. We were playing 12-inch.
Oh, 12 with the glove.
Yeah. Right. So I used to laugh. I'd get up and I'd single, hit the ball up the middle or through the hole from short and thin. I get to first base, and basically then I'd end up walking around the bases because either my second hitter or my third hitter would hit a home run.
Incredible. Oh my God. What? Another gentleman here in Chicago played softball. I don't know if he played with you, was Carlos May.
Oh, no, I didn't. Carlos didn't play with that team at all that I know of, unless he played afterwards.
Right, exactly.
Because Pepe played with them afterwards.
Pepitone?
Yeah, he played with them.
I wonder if he made any games with the extracurricular activity.
Well, it was an interesting league because they paid you for the weekend.
Sure.
Okay.
Wow.
Because I was just getting out of baseball, I was collecting unemployment
Nice.
because I was trying to find a job, and you got to collect unemployment.
Right. Keep that.
And so between that and that, we laughed because I made probably more money then than I did playing baseball. I made
can
more money in the
imagine.
softball team because
Sure,
I got a bonus each month, and I got plus a salary each week.
Wow, that is so neat to hear. I didn't know when I saw that. I said, I got to ask Gene about that. So now your career has been since all that in the insurance field, correct, sir?
I'm a securities broker and insurance broker, right?
And it's been ever since you have retired officially from the game.
79. 79
Wow.
is when I started.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is fantastic. And did you ever think you would stay in Chicago, in Illinois, this whole time?
Pretty much. My wife's family's here, and my wife's family wouldn't have probably traveled. We could have gone other places. My parents would have gone any place that we went. Unfortunately, we lost my parents at young ages, so we didn't get to see them as much as. My mom passed away when my son was 2, and my dad passed away when both kids were like 6 or 7.
Wow.
So they were very young. But yeah, otherwise, I love Scottsdale. I would have loved to stay
there. Yeah.
But Jeannie didn't like the heat. She liked the 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And also her family's all here.
Yeah.
And now that we have our 3 grandchildren, and my son has worked with me for 15 years, and so his business, he's in Inverness. My daughter's in Crystal Lake. I'm in Hoffman, so we see each other.
Yeah, it's a very close vicinity. Very close vicinity. Yes, right. That is great. Gene, I got to tell you, like I said, when my friend Dave Kashaba reached out to me and says, I see a gentleman on Sundays when we golf, I go, oh my God, I would love to interview Gene if there was the opportunity. I really want to thank you for today because
my pleasure, John.
It brought me a chance to go down memory lane and reminisce about, I don't know what it is, Gene. It's that first impression when you go into that park, and I can remember lineups, athletes, everything of that era. And I will always remember you. And that was something, because I remember guys like you and Pete Lecoq, and I think it was Pat Bork, a first baseman. It just some great.
You're bringing back some old names. Yeah.
Some great times of a great era. And Gene Heiser, I really want to thank you today for this podcast.
My pleasure, John.
You got it. And let's hope to see each other somewhere down the road. And I'll tell you, on Sundays, just keep hitting them straight.
Are you a golfer?
I golf part-time actually with Dave. Okay. So I'm going to try to get out to Hilldale one day.
He always plays Sunday mornings right before. We have a men's league. And Dave always plays before the men's league.
Yeah, and I think there's another gentleman you might know out there, Brant.
Brant always plays with
Brant Barton. Right? Yeah, he's out there, and
those two play together, and then they usually have a couple of new people each week or something.
And I even heard the ex-Cub Bill Campbell's over there too.
Bill is my partner. We play every Sunday together. So yeah.
And of course would also love to talk to him one day. Gene Hiser, thanks for the memories. It was a great time here in Chicago.
Thanks, John. You take care.
You got it. Take care, sir.